Hello, welcome to the Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob, and in this video, we're going to be doing a full and thorough review of the Ossiarch Bonereapers. And hopefully by the end of this video, you won't realize that you're boned, and instead, you're going to be super excited to run this army. This is going to be one of many videos I'm going to make about Ossiarch Bonereapers. We're going to do tier lists for the units, we're going to do lists, we're going to do combos, and those are all going to be in other videos, especially when points and how you build these armies are all integrated together. But for now, we're just going to go through all of the war scrolls and the rules for the army, so if you're a beginner, or even if you are experienced, you can kind of talk about the combos, the things you can do, and really understand how the rules work. So let's dive straight in. Oh, I should also say, by the way, this entire thing is brought to you by the Honest Wargamer Patreon, and of course, everyone on the Honest Wargamer Twitch. If you ever want to leave comments below, that I really appreciate it. I learn lots from what you think about what these units do. So let me know what you think about the units. Let me know what you think of the video. Thanks very much. Okay, so the first thing to talk about with your army are your battle traits, and these are special rules that you have which aren't your war scrolls or your spell laws or anything else, and they're going to apply to how your army plays. For battle traits for Ossiarch Bonereapers, you have effectively one of two things that you can do in three different phases: the movement phase, the charge phase, and the combat phase. And then you can choose to do one or the other of those, and in some cases you're going to be able to also do them in your opponent's turn. So there's quite a lot of give there, and they're kind of like opposite each other, and some of them are really strong, and you can't use one if you use the other. For example, Unstoppable Advance and Reform Ranks are both done in your movement phase, so you know you can only do one or you can only do the other. Simple. So what do? In your movement phase, you get the option to add 2 inches to the move characteristic of all units wholly within 12 inches of an Ossiarch Bonereaper hero you pick to use the ability. That's pretty good because obviously early game, you're going to be able to move into the mid-board much faster. That's quite nice, or run a unit down. Later on, probably when you get into like these big melees, and this in my opinion is particularly strong for what probably will be a fairly elite tanky army, is the ability to reform ranks, where for the rest of the turn, while they're wholly within 12 inches of that hero, friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper units can use charge abilities even if they use the retreat ability. So you're going to be able to retreat out of combat and charge. This is incredibly powerful, especially if you combo this with things such as counter charge, which is the generic command ability, which means you can retreat and charge. Later, there's a bunch of really fun stuff, although I don't think that combo actually works. But there we go. Like, either retreat and charge, really strong, get out, dodge, fight, or move faster. Next one, in any charge phase, and this is why this is important. So in any charge phase, which will combo with counter charge, is the ability to do coordinated charge or counter strike. Coordinated charge lets all friendly Ossiarch Bonereapers wholly within 12 inches of the hero that chose it to get +1 to their charge rolls. That's kind of like a minimal effect, but I guess it guarantees some charges, which is quite nice. And the other one, counter strike, is for the rest of the turn, friendly units, again, if no friendly units have used this, you can pick a friendly Bonereaper hero to use the ability. For the rest of the turn, friendly units, melee weapons have anti-charge, again, while they're wholly within 12 inches of that hero. So that hero is going to be able to have make units that get charged have +1 rend in your opponent's turn. So you're basically always going to choose that in your opponent's turn, which is really nice. Like, that's also going to include the hero as well, so be particularly effective on big tanky heroes like Katakros. And then finally, you've got in the combat phase, and again, this is any combat phase, which means every combat phase, you've got bludgeon or impenetrable ranks. With bludgeon, again, units wholly within 12 inches of the hero you choose to do it, add 1 to the wound rolls for combat attacks, which is really great. +1 to wound is very strong, especially as you could affect multiple units. And then for impenetrable ranks, then all units wholly within 12 inches of that hero that you pick to do the ability have a 5-up ward save, which is also, in my opinion, really nice, because your opponent charges you and you can be like 5-up ward save. Yeah, so you've got a load of options here to do like either be more offensive, defensive, retreat and charge, and this is going to combo really nicely with a bunch of obviously all your integrated generic command abilities that you get from the main book, like counter charge, redeploy as an example. So I think you've got some real options here at the beginning, and it already feels like Ossiarch Bonereapers are going to be a very tactical army. Obviously, along with your battle traits, you have your free terrain feature, although not free to buy. The Bone-Tithe Nexus is a massive piece of terrain. And don't forget, terrain can be destroyed, or faction terrain can be destroyed in Age of Sigmar 4. Therefore, maybe you want to protect it, maybe you don't. And that massive base is going to make it more of a problem to destroy. to protect. It's going to be more of a problem to protect because it is on a really big base. Thankfully, as a unit, it doesn't have anywhere near the impact as something like the Loon Shrine does for Gloomspite Gitz, which returns slain models. Instead, this just occasionally will give you a bit of a bonus. So your opponent's probably going to be less interested in destroying it, and you're going to be probably less interested in defending it. And that feels pretty good. It's a nice kind of trade-off. So it's got 13 health with a 4-up armor save, okay? And then it's got this ability that you do in your hero phase, and it's called Deadly Gaze. You pick a visible enemy unit within 18 inches of this feature to be the target. Okay, roll a dice on a 4+, pick one of the following effects to apply. Subtract 1 from hit rolls to the target until the start of next turn, which is fantastic, but again, it's a 4-up. Subtract 1 from casting rolls and or chanting rolls to the target until the start of next turn. That's very good, especially if you're trying to use something like Arkhan to gain like a magical difference. You got Punishment of Ignorance, where you subtract 1 from the casting rolls. Punishment of Lethargy, where you halve the target's move characteristic until the start of next turn, which is also, in my opinion, excellent for shutting down those faster units that maybe are threatening long bomb charges. And then lastly, you got Punishment of Death, inflict D3 mortal damage on the target. And while that doesn't sound that impressive as being able to like shut down a unit's movement, like D3 mortal damage in the right situation could pick off that hero that's providing a massive support to your opponent's army. So that's not a bad one either. Ultimately, this is a free piece of terrain, at least points-wise, for you to bring. So you're going to bring it along with you, but this isn't as impactful as other pieces, which is fine, and it can do some really good stuff. So you and your opponent are going to put it down on your priority list for protecting it and killing it, and that means it might get to do its ability more than you think. The next thing you have when you write your army list is you choose one of 4 different battle formations, and the Ossiarch Bonereapers have theirs pretty much locked to certain types of units. So there are 4, and this is going to maybe define how you write your army list. The first one, and the broadest, is the Mortisan Council. You get the passive Necrotic Symphony, add 1 to the casting rolls for friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper infantry. That's important, infantry wizards. So when it affects someone like Arkhan, as an example. +1 to casting rolls is great, especially because you're going to be able to cast loads of your spell laws, your manifestations. So I think that's good, and because it applies to multiple different wizards, if those wizards seem cheap enough and good enough to use, that could be quite good. The next one is really interesting. It's called the Mortek Ballistari, and in your shooting phase, you can use the Crawling Barrage ability, where you can have up to 3 friendly Mortek Crawlers, so those are the artillery pieces, that are wholly within friendly territory, and they've not used a move ability this turn to be the targets, and you can add 1 to the hit rolls for each target's shooting attacks. So the Mortek Crawler, or up to 3 Mortek Crawlers, are going to get +1 to hit in your shooting phase if you haven't moved them. That's quite interesting. If the Mortek Crawler is cheap enough and if their shooting attack is good enough, then you might see a very savage gun line arriving from this. But if it ends up being too good, they definitely will just put the points up. So anyway, but for now, that could be really interesting. The Kavalos Lance is for all you Death Rider fans. You get the ability Swift as Death, which you can use once per battle across the army in the deployment phase. You can pick up to 3 friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper cavalry units. So that's definitely going to be our cheeky Death Riders, although also could be one of our Liege Kavaloses. And then each target can move 6 inches, but cannot end that move in combat. So a 6-inch move at the start of the game, as we call it, a scout move, is really good, especially for screening the board. Making it so that you've got some distance between your back lines, maybe your fragile casters, and also the enemy. Also means if you were going for like a first turn big charge, as an example, then initially you can straight away get up the board, and then you obviously going to be able to move and then charge, so you could get a lot of units really deep into enemy lines. And lastly, the Mortek Phalanx lets you use the Send in the Reserve ability once per turn in your movement phase, but it's only once per turn across the whole army, where you can pick a friendly Mortek unit that's been destroyed to be the target. You roll a dice, and on a 5-up, you set up a replacement unit with half the number of models from the target unit rounding up on the battlefield, more than 9 inches from all enemy units. And that's okay, but generally this is what you would call like an elastic mechanic, where you've lost some models, therefore you'd like to return them. You're also returning them on a 5-up, so it probably isn't going to happen often. So therefore you're not really adding rules onto your army to make them better. You're putting yourself a safety net, and a very weak one at that. if you end up losing some models. Now, it could end up being a position where, you know, you have tons and tons of Mortek Guard, and your whole idea is you just keep returning them. That could be quite interesting, but we'll have to see what the war scrolls look like for that situation. When you're writing your army list, one of your heroes is going to be able to take a heroic trait, and these are the teachings of the Tithe Reapers, and you get 3 to choose from. I'm going to start with the worst, and I'll start with the worst one first, which is a Mighty Archosian, where if the unmodified hit roll for an attack that targets this unit is a 1 to 3, the attack fails and the attack sequence ends, which is a weird way to say you can only hit this unit on a 4+. Now, maybe you want to get one specific hero and improve their survivability significantly, but the other two, in my opinion, are much stronger. The other one, Aura of Sterility, which is a passive, is subtract 1 from wound rolls for shooting attacks that target friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper units where they're wholly within 12 inches of this unit. Now, you're going to try and keep heroes wholly within 12 inches anyway to use your battle trait abilities. Therefore, in my opinion, this is pretty good, especially if we go into a shooting heavy meta. So if you're playing against lots of armies that have a lot of shooting, this is going to reduce their effectiveness, and that's good. And then the one that I think is probably the strongest is Diversionary Tactics, which is a passive, where you subtract 2 from the charge rolls for enemy units while they're within 12 inches of this unit. So this means even if they end up 3 inches away from you, which is the closest you can get before you do charge, that still means they have to roll a 5 to complete a charge. So I think that that feels very strong, especially if you end up doing a redeploy with the unit or hero that has this, so that you bring enemy units into that aura. It's fun. It's not wholly within 12 inches, just within 12 inches. I like Diversionary Tactics a lot, Aura of Sterility, and then Mighty Archosian probably last. Also, on your army list, you need to write down one of your heroes to have an Artifact of Power. There are 3 to choose from. The first one is the Marrow Pact, which you're able to use once per battle in any combat phase. And the effect of that is that for the rest of the turn, if the unmodified hit roll for a combat attack that targets this unit is a 1 or 2, you inflict 1 mortal damage on the attacking unit after the fight ability has been resolved. This is quite a fun ability that you could potentially use to have a character run them into a unit with 1,000,000 attacks, so they take a lot of mortal damage in return. However, that requires your opponent to have a unit with a lot of attacks, and that's also you wanting to have a character that's probably going to get killed, because even though they're going to take the mortal damage, you're still going to get hit by that unit with loads of attacks. So that'll be situational, and it's only once per battle, so it's a one-trick pony. The next one is the Load of Saturation, where it's just a passive, and this unit has a ward save of 5+. You can only get a ward save from your battle traits in the right situation, so maybe that one is redundant, but also it means you always get to have, you know, some safety on one of your characters. And then you have the Helm of Tyranny, where you subtract 2 from the control scores of enemy units while they're within 12 inches of this unit. And that seems to make sense. A unit of 10 is now going to only be count for 8 on an objective. That feels really nice. I would say that feels like maybe the most obvious one to take, but the ward save obviously really good as always. When you write on your army list, you have to choose which spell law that you're choosing. You only have one for the Ossiarch Bonereapers, and it's the Law of Ossian Sorcery. It contains 3 spells, and your first spell, the Empower Netherite Weapons, is cast on a 5, so really low value. And in addition to that, you get it's also an unlimited spell. That means that if you have 3 wizards in your army, then you're going to be able to cast it 3 times in your hero phase across those 3 different wizards. But the same wizard can't cast it more than once. And what that does is you choose a friendly Ossiarch Bonereapers unit within 12 inches, not wholly within 12, which we love. And that unit gets to do critical hits, which is where you do something special on a 6 to hit on 5s instead of 6s. This feels like a great unlimited spell to have in your army, and obviously it's going to improve the combat attacks of your entire force, which most of your army is combat orientated. The next one is Drain Vitality, and it's cast on a 7. It's got a limited range in 12 inches. You pick a visible enemy unit within 12. Until the start of your next turn, subtract 1 from hit rolls for the target's attacks and subtract 1 from the save rolls for the target. And obviously, -1 to save is really impactful, as obviously this will stack with Rend, so you're going to be able to punch through some heavily armored units. But what's nice is it's because your wizards have access to all of the spells. In a situation where you're fighting an army that doesn't have really high armor, you're not going to be too bothered about that. But -1 to hit is also good, so we love that. And it's also until the start of your next turn, which is also quite a long duration, but it is limited range. And the last one, Shard Storm, is cast on a 7. You pick to cast your spell, pick a visible enemy unit within 18 inches, and you roll a number of dice. with a number of dice equal to the number of models in the target unit. For each 5+, you inflict 1 mortal damage on the target. This is what we would call a horde clearing spell. But the real question is, are there going to be hordes in Age of Sigmar? We don't know. So maybe that's a little less useful, but ultimately you've got a really nice -1 to hit, -1 save spell, and the ability to increase the effectiveness of your units because of exploding 5s. In Age of Sigmar 4, your armies are always able to also, on your army list, bring a manifestation lore. There are generic manifestations which we will be going through in detail in another video, but for Ossiarch Bonereapers, you have your own unique manifestation lore made up of 3 different manifestations, used to be known as endless spells, but these are physical models that you'll have on the board, and all of them are going to be cast on a 6, so they cast like a normal spell, and then they're summoned to the tabletop, so it's like a unit that you summon. There are, like I said, there are 3. They're all cast on 6, and they all have to be set up within 12 inches of the caster and 9 inches from all enemy units. The first of the manifestations we're going to look at is the Nightmare Predator. It's got still 7 health, and again, if you don't know, you can destroy manifestations. So you can get into combat with them, you can shoot them, you can beat them up, you can target them, you can even cast a spell at them, I'm pretty certain, and then just smash them. Another way to get rid of them, and that therefore 7 health with a 5-up save means it's going to be pretty easy to get rid of, but they are also going to be able to be resummoned back onto the board. Another way to get rid of them is being able to banish them as well and get them off the board, as well as stopping the spell that's attempting to cast them. So those are all the ways to get rid of it. It also has a 6-up ward save and is kind of just a combat unit that you can summon. Don't forget, manifestations are free, so whatever you would pay points-wise for a unit with 7 health, a 5-up save that has 6 attacks that hit on 4s, which isn't great, wounds on a 2, rend 2, which is really great, and is damage 2. So that's what you're getting. You're getting that free unit that you can summon with your spells. However, it's also got an ability at the end of any turn. It's got the Death Incarnate ability. If this manifestation was destroyed or banished this turn, this unit can be summoned. The unit that summoned it is on the battlefield. You roll a dice. On a 4-up, you set this manifestation again, wholly within 12 inches of the unit and more than 9 inches from all enemy units. So this is just an incredibly annoying one, because if you do end up getting rid of it, it can just pop up again at the end of the turn, which is quite spicy. It's not going to have a massive impact on the game. It's going to just be a lot of something that you do, but I guess it will take up a lot of mental load for you and your opponent, and ultimately it could be really fun. It could be super fun. The next one we're looking at is the Soulstealer Carrion. It's got 7 health and a 5-up save, and again, you can banish it on a 7, and it moves 10 inches. It's got 6 attacks, 4s and 2s, rend 1, damage D3, which is honestly legit. It's fine. For free, again, you just got to cast it. But the important part, it's got a passive, which is Aviarch Sentry. You subtract 5, which is a wild number, from the control scores of enemy infantry units while they're within 6 inches of this manifestation. 5, which obviously means if you double this up with the artifact we looked at earlier, that's going to be -7 to the control score of an infantry unit, because this is only on infantry. And obviously, if you're playing against an army that doesn't have infantry units, then they're not going to be that bothered. But in the right situation, this is going to make you just grab objectives off your opponent. And we already know this doubles up with an artifact that you have to take. You have to take an artifact already. So this feels really good. I think you'll see this cast a lot. The next one we're going to look at is the Bone-Tithe Shrieker. It's got 7 health, a 5-up save, and a 6-up ward save, which is important because we're going to come back to that in a minute. It moves 8 inches, and for some reason it's got an incredibly okay shooting attack. At 12-inch range, it can do the Soul-Rending Shriek, which is 4 attacks, 3s and 4s, rend 1 D3 damage, but can also shoot into combat, which is pretty good. It's also got the Soul-Rending Shriek, which is 4 attacks, 3s and 4s, rend 1 damage D3. So this thing's like a legit unit that just is legit. So you could summon it anyway, but that's not the reason you're going to summon it. The reason you're going to summon it is because of the passive No Escape, where you subtract 1 from the ward rolls. That's right, the ward rolls, the most special, best save you can get in this game, for enemy units while they're within 12 inches of this manifestation. This is like an auto cast. This is immediate, this just takes a third of the survivability away from Nurgle immediately. This is outrageous, in my opinion. So you're going to see this try to be banished a lot, cast a lot. This is so crazy good. The first war scroll we're going to look at has to be the big boss man himself, Katakros, the leader of the Ossiarch Bonereapers, and obviously the Mortarch of the Necropolis. This guy is so good, it's wild. He's got 20 health with a 3-up save, so already very survivable. in addition, has a 6-up ward save, but don't forget, you can, in the combat phase, also be able to give them a 5-up ward save because of the battle trait, which we're going to come to in a minute because he's got some crazy cool stuff. Control value of 5 is great. His only downside, he's slow, move 4, but you do have a way to make him move slightly faster, as well as obviously runs and other stuff, again, from the battle traits. In combat, not too bad. He's got 5 attacks that do damage 3 with Indicat. He gets only 3 of those attacks if he takes 10 or more damage. 3s and 3s, Ren 2, damage 3, crit 2 hits. So don't forget, you can cast a spell on these, so it's going to be critting on 5s. We love that. The Shield of Mortis is 3 attacks that are damage 2, but still with good rend. And then you got the Retinue Blades with 10 attacks with crit 2 hits as well. It feels okay. I wouldn't say quite describe him as a combat powerhouse like some of the other units, but still pretty good. What he is kind of like a medium combat bruiser unit in the fact that he's very, very survivable. But the support that he brings to the rest of the Ossiarch Bonereapers army is amazing. Let's look at a couple of the ways in which he does that. First off, he's got a passive, which is the Prime Necropolis, where you add 3 to the control scores of other friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper units, where they're wholly within 18 inches of this unit. And as we've already talked about, if you already cast one of the manifestations and you have the right artifact, you could be reducing some units' control score by up to 7. And then adding 3 to yours is nuts, in my opinion. So that's really good. As if that wasn't nuts enough, he's got another passive, Mortarch of the Necropolis, where if this unit uses Relentless Discipline ability, which is the battle traits we talked about earlier, the ability affects friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper units wholly within 18 inches of this unit instead of wholly within 12. Therefore, you can use the 5-up Ward Aura on all the units within 18 inches, including himself, which is pretty nice in the combat phase. Retreat and Charge for all the units within 18 inches, which is really nice in my personal opinion. So I think that's really good. In addition, he has the ability to once per turn, which does mean every turn, to have a reaction. Your opponent declared a command for a unit within 18 inches of this unit. And you can use the Aviarch Spymaster, where you roll a dice on a 5+, that command has no effect, and it still counts as having been used, and the command point is still lost. So this is for a unit within 18 inches, not wholly within 18 inches, which means countercharge 33% of the time isn't going to work. This is absolutely massive, and the fact that he's doing this in every turn is wild. So not only does he massively benefit his army, he shuts down enemy units as well. And then he has a command ability. That's what the command point symbol up there says, the little 1. Supreme Lord of the Bonereaper Legions, where you pick up to 3 friendly Ossiarch Bonereapers wholly within 18 inches. Until the start of your next turn, you add 1 to save rolls for the targets while they're still wholly within 18. So you also, when wholly within 18, also obviously get the ability to have that 5-up Ward Aura in the combat phase. +1 save to those units. You have good armor saves in Ossiarch Bonereapers. This guy feels like such a massive auto include because of what he brings to the other units. The real question is he going to be so expensive that you can't bring enough of the other units to really benefit from how many buffs this guy does? But we love this. This guy, in my opinion, is really good. The Aviarch Spymaster is nutty, in my opinion, and so Katakros still looking absolutely stonks. Next up, if you want some magical support, you can take another Mortarch, Arkhan The Black, who is your kind of like spellcasting support piece that's also a combat monster. Not that powerful in combat, but still. He's got 14 health with a 3-up save, and he moves 12 inches, and he's got a control value of 5. So that 14 health with 3-up save in conjunction with the fact he's got a 6-up ward save, which is nice. Obviously, the ability to potentially get a 5-up ward if he ends up in combat, make him much more survivable. He's also, and importantly, a 3-cast wizard, plus one more than the Lord of Change. Pretty rough. Also, will be a War Master, which means he'll be a general in your army if you don't have another War Master. Is unique, so you can take one of them as well, and is, of course, they've got the monster keyword. So in combat, he's okay. 4 attacks that do damage D3, but they do hit on 4s, but they can have exploding, or they do have exploding hits that could explode on 5s, which I think is interesting. And then the Razark's Ebon Claws is 6 attacks, which is damage 2. So it's fine. And then if this guy gets wounded too much, then the Razark's Ebon Claws go down to 4. Okay. He does have the ability to have +1 to cast, which is a passive from the Staff of Spirits, where you add 1 to casting rolls to this unit, and each time this unit successfully casts a spell, you can heal 1, which is a nice way to kind of keep up the healing on this unit. So I think that's quite nice. He's also got the Doom of Traitors, which is done once per turn in any combat phase, which does mean every combat phase. If this unit charged this turn, pick an enemy unit in combat with it to be the target, you roll a dice on 2+, you inflict that many mortal damage. If the target's a hero, you double the amount of mortal damage. So you could do 6 mortal damage to an enemy hero, which I think is quite fun. Then he also has the Mortarch of Sacrament, which is honestly pretty wild, which is a reaction to your opponent declaring a spell ability. If a friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper unit holding within 18 inches of this unit was picked to be the target of a spell, you roll a dice on a 4+, you ignore the effect of that spell. This unit can use this ability more than once per phase, but only once per spell ability, which is wild. That's multiple 4-up spell ignores, which I think is going to be very effective. And lastly, he's got Curse of Years, which is his own unique War Scroll spell, which is pretty famous, which casts on 6. You pick a visible enemy unit within 18 inches and you roll 10 dice. For each 6-up, you'll inflict a mortal damage on the unit and then you'll roll a dice. So if I roll 2 6s, I'll then roll 2 more dice. If those dice are 5s, for each 5, I'll inflict a mortal damage and I'll be allowed to roll another dice. And it keeps going down. But I have to roll 6s, then 5s, then 4s, then 3s, then 2s. And I can keep rolling 2s until I'm able to roll another die, until I roll all 1s. So you could do quite a lot of mortal damage on this. It's a bit of a slot machine, like bingo, lottery kind of service. Lots of mortal wounds. But is pretty situational. But it's pretty nice. The fact that he's a 3-cast wizard is really great because it means you're obviously going to be able to cast this if you want to, cast one of those manifestations, also cast like Empower Netherite weapons on a unit. So he can do quite a lot of support for the army, which I think is interesting. Isn't super strong in like the combat area, but can put some healing up and is fairly tanky with that 3-up save. So I feel like Arkhan's a pretty great choice. Our next named character is Arch-Kavalos Zandtos. He's a cavalry hero, and he's also unique. Therefore, you can only have one of them in your army. He's got 8 health with a 3-up armor save, which is very nice for a bruiser-style melee unit. He's got 10 health, moves 10 inches, and he's got control value of 2. In combat, he's got the Dark Lance, which is 5 attacks, 3s and 3s, Rend 2, which is good, and damage 2, which is a bit weak. But if he does charge, you get +1 damage. And in addition, obviously, you can get exploding 5. So any 6s to hit is going to be crit hits on 5s versus on 6s, which is quite nice. So you could end up spiking a crazy amount of damage on the charge. Then his steed has just got 4 attacks, but it's a Haunts, so what do you expect? Now, the rule I really like with this guy is he's got the Spear of the Cavaloi, right? This is a passive where if this unit uses a charge ability, it can pass through models in enemy infantry units as if it had fly. I already think this army is going to be so strong against infantry-based armies because obviously the ability to reduce the control score through the manifestation. But that's nuts, and it's going to put him in a crazy good position, which I really love. In addition to that, he's got in any charge phase, if this unit charges phase, pick an enemy infantry unit that it passed across to be the target. You roll a dice on a 2-up, they take D3 mortal damage. I just want to point out this guy also has a 6-up ward save in case anyone tells me I've missed it. So this guy's going to just charge through stuff, explode stuff, and then get through screens, which I think is honestly really cool. Very cool. But in addition to that, he's got a once per battle in any combat phase, still their breath ability. So it's only going to be once per battle. But if this unit is in combat for the rest of the turn, add 1 to the attacks characteristic of melee weapons used by friendly, non-hero Ossiarch Bonereaper units where they're holding within 12 inches of this unit. And that's going to be very effective, in my opinion, especially because if you charged him forward with a bunch of Deathriders, then obviously adding +1 to their attack characteristics, so you're doing this massive single-turn, explodey, huge amount of volume of damage. But also, if your opponent charges you and you've popped your 5-up ward bubble, Katakros is there and you've popped the +1 save, then this guy goes, right, I'm now going to give everyone +1 attack, and also I've got anti-charge Rend 1. It feels like you can also build an amazing anvil out of this unit as well, even though he's a cavalry dude, which is fun. So yeah, he feels really legit. The non-name version of the Liege Kavalos is just the Liege Kavalos, so Zandtos is the name version, so you can take multiples of these, but they are a little bit worse. It's got 1 less health, still moves 10 inches, still got a 3-up save, still got that 6-up ward save. His Commander's Blade has got 1 less Rend, because Zandtos has got Rend 2. Still got 5 attacks, still has crit 2 hits, and still got +1 damage on the charge. So there we go. And then his Haunts has still got some attacks. He still has that Spear of the Cavaloi ability, though. So being able to charge through infantry units as if they weren't there, and also doing mortal wound damage to infantry units if it did end up charging through them. But their unique ability for the Kavalos over Zandtos is you declared a fight ability for this unit, and as a reaction. So this unit decides it's going to fight. As a reaction, you can pick a friendly Kavalos Deathriders unit that's not used a fight ability, and they are going to be able to fight after them, kind of semi-simultaneously. So as soon as this unit has fought, the Deathriders will then fight. This is obviously good because you can then chain combo these activations. But this guy himself isn't particularly impressive as a combat unit anyway, and I don't think he's great as a force multiplier. Importantly, though, he's obviously going to be able to take those command traits that we talked about earlier. So potentially it's got that the -2 charge bubble around him, and is very survivable because of that 3-up armor save, which near Katakros is going to be a 2-up armor save. And also maybe has got the other aura for reducing control scores and could be fairly quick for making that be effective. So maybe that's the reason you can take a Liege Kavalos, is to stack all those buffs that you can take in the army. So our first little infantry wizard that we're going to look at is a unique one, so you can only take one of them in your army, and it's Vokmortian, the master of the Bone-Tithe. He's got 5 health with a 4-up armor save and a 6-up ward save, and obviously he's not really built for shooting or fighting. That's not really what he's there for. The important reason he's here is because of his once per battle in any hero phase ability, Voice of Nagash. You're probably going to do it in your opponent's turn. It's a little bit confusing, so I'll try to explain it. You pick a visible enemy unit within 12 inches of this unit to be the target. And again, don't forget, this is once per battle. For the rest of the turn, non-fight core abilities cost 1 command point for the target to use. So we have a bunch of core abilities in the game. Moving is a core ability. Charging is a core ability. So those core abilities are now going to cost a command point to do. So you're effectively shutting down a unit from being able to do most things, or you're draining your opponent of massive resources. Don't forget, if you double this up with Katakros, when they try to use a command point to do that, then I think he's going to be able to steal it. Maybe. I'll have to check whether or not that works. That might work as a combo. But either way, this is going to shut down an enemy unit very well. He's also a 2-cast wizard. As if that wasn't enough. I'm like, okay, that's fine. He had the ability to shut stuff down. That's incredible. He's also a 2-cast wizard. I should bring that up. Which is great. Put a manifestation on the board, or use some of the generic spells, but he's also got his own generic spell, which is the Mortal Contract that's cast on a 7. It's quite complex, or it's a lot of words, but if we break it down, you pick a visible enemy unit within 18 inches, and then you pick a friendly Ossiarch Bonereapers unit within 18 inches, and each time the enemy unit uses an ability on your unit, they take mortal damage. So they take D3 mortal damage. So that's quite a lot of words, and it's going to be explained a lot better on the tabletop. But effectively, you mortally contract 2 units together, and every time they try to hurt you, they take damage themselves, which is good. So that's quite interesting. So I think Vokmortian feels very strong. Him being a 2-cast wizard is really good. 2-cast wizards in this game, not you, Lord of Change, you suck, but 2-cast wizards in this game are very effective because you can cast their spell or the lore spell that you want to cast in addition to those powerful manifestations. So they're always going to be a little bit better because they're going to be able to bring all this additional support to the army. So Vokmortian's looking really nice. Next unit we're going to look at is an infantry level 1 caster, the Mortisan Soulreaper. He's got 5 health with a 4-up armor save, and obviously that classic 6-up ward save. Moves 5 inches, so it's fairly slow, and definitely is not what I would describe as a Soul Reaper with only 3 attacks, hitting on 4s that do damage too. So not a combat caster, and instead he's just a cheap level 1 wizard, maybe that you keep at the back of the board, which is odd because he has a passive called Soul Reaper, where you subtract 1 from the wound rolls for combat attacks made by enemy units while they're in combat with this unit. So in the right situation, and don't forget, you do have those big 3-inch combat auras, you could potentially throw this guy into combat, or maybe even have him just behind the front line of a unit of Mortek Guard. So when a unit does touch a Mortek Guard, then that unit is -1 to wound. So you could maybe be quite clever with the ranges on that. Anyway, that's a Soul Reaper ability. And he has a reaction where you declared a fight ability for this unit. And again, a frontline fighty caster, because his ability is engaged with this guy fighting, and he's only got 3 attacks. So that's a pretty crazy pick. But if this guy does fight, then he can immediately make a non-hero Ossiarch Bonereaper infantry unit, so basically Mortek Guard, but some of the other bigger guys as well, fight at this immediately after this guy with +1 to hit, which is quite powerful because you've been making that unit -1 to wound, you've been making these guys +1 to hit. That's quite nice. So he's a unit that combos really nicely in the role as a frontline kind of melee guy that's also a level 1 wizard as well. But his survivability I'm going to bring into question with only 5 health and a 4-up save. So pretty interesting unit. The next unit we're going to look at is the incredibly confusing Mortisan Soulmason. It's got 6 health with a 4-up save, and it moves 5 inches and a control value of 2. It's also a 2-cast wizard, and the reason this guy is a little confusing, 2-cast wizard is obviously excellent for all the reasons I've already stated, but if you look at the model, it's a dude on a palanquin, but that palanquin has got legs, and therefore, in the last edition of Age of Sigmar, I'm trying not to reference it too much, that was considered to be cavalry. But in this one, he has the keyword infantry. And I am perplexed as to whether or not he is. I don't know what he is, okay? That's what I'm going to say. Either way, he's a 2-cast wizard that is infantry, and that's important. He's obviously also a hero, okay? So what does he have? He's got some okay combat attacks, arguably maybe better than the guy with a scythe that's meant to be in combat, and the leg chair thing has got 2 attacks, which is weird. But importantly, and definitely the reason you're going to bring this guy is because of its unique spell, Soul Guide, which is cast on a 7. Pick a visible friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper unit wholly within 12 inches of the caster. Until the end of that turn, the target has the strike first for the rest of the turn. That's amazing. Don't forget, you're going to be able to cast this in your opponent's turn using a command point, and therefore also do countercharge, and that unit will countercharge with strike first, which is wild. So this feels like probably one of those ones you're going to bring along because strike first is so effective, and even if you don't get strike first off, he's still got the ability to cast again and also bring some of those manifestations to bear. So you can really stack stuff with this guy, and I feel like he's super, super good. Next unit we look at is the Mortisan Ossifector. Again, a level 1 wizard, not level 2 like the other guys, a level 1 wizard. It's got 5 health, 4-up save, moves 5 inches, and is not obviously good in combat. The important part about this unit is that once per turn for the army in your hero phase, you can pick a friendly Gothizzar Harvester, Morghast Archai, or Morghast Harbinger unit wholly within 12 inches and roll a dice on a 3+. You add 1 to the rend characteristic that targets melee weapons until the start of your next turn. So I feel like if you're building a Gothizzar Harvester list, Gothizzar Harvester that you would take in with some Mortek Guard, and you wanted to do like improve its rend, but like improving the +1 rend to the attacks of the unit doesn't feel big. I feel like you really want to do this with the Harbingers of the Archai because they've got loads of big melee attacks. Adding rend is great, but it's also situational, only happens on a 3+. Maybe the real reason that you're going to take this unit is because of your ability to its effect on a Mortek Crawler. So the Mortek Crawler that you can see there is able to add +1 to the roll of its Deathly Barrage if it's within 12 inches or wholly within 12 inches of an Ossifector. So I think if you were running the list that used the multiple Mortek Crawlers, then maybe this guy would see a place. But I think a situational buff of a 3+ for just +1 rend doesn't feel like this guy's great. The next foot wizard that we have is the Mortisan Boneshaper, 5 health, 4-up save, 6-up ward, only moves 5 inches, control value 2, and obviously rubbish in combat. The reason that you would bring a Boneshaper is because of his ability, Boneshaper, which you do once per turn in your hero phase. You pick a friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper unit wholly within 12 inches units with a target, and then you need to roll a 3-up. You either heal 3 to the target, so you could heal Nagash for 3, or if the target is not damaged, return a number slain model to the target unit with a combined health characteristic of up to 3. So you could bring back 3 Mortek Guard because they're 1 wound each, or you could bring 1, I think you bring back 1 Deathrider, depends if they're 3 or 4 wounds, whichever. So that's what it was there for. But the problem is this is once per turn in your hero phase, and it's on a 3-up. He's a level 1 caster, so he's going to be able to do spells, which is, I guess, valuable, like, because it is. But at this point, every time you take a hero, you're probably going to be needing to unlock a new regiment. There's only so many heroes you want to take. There's only so much you want those heroes to do. And this feels like, unless this is very cheap, you aren't going to get a lot out of this guy. So I think this guy needs to be very, very cheap to be seen in lists. So the first non-hero war scroll we're going to look at is the Gothizzar Harvester. And that's because the Gothizzar Harvester, as well as being like a combat monster, is also a support piece for the rest of your Ossiarch Bonereaper army. Let's have a look at what it does. It's got 10 health with a 4-up save, moves 6 inches, and has got a control value of 5, which is nice, and obviously it's got a 6-up ward. Why is it at the bottom? Who knows? Okay. So already its survivability is pretty good. With Katakros nearby, it's going to be on a 3-up save straight away. You can get additional ward saves, so can be fairly survivable. In combat, it's pretty good with 6 attacks that do damage 2 and then 4 more attacks that do damage 2, but unfortunately, they all hit on 4, so minuses to hit are going to be really rough on these. They also got 4 attacks in shooting at a 12-inch range, which again, 4s of 4s round 1 damage 1, but it is a fun little shooting attack. And they are fairly slow at movement 6, but obviously you've got ways to improve movement in this army as well. But the important part is what they're able to do in supporting the army via healing. So there was a lot of healing in the Ossiarch Bonereapers before, but it was all centered around the heroes. Instead, that seems to have all been shifted into the Harvester, which I think is quite good. So it's got this passive Bone Harvest, where each time an enemy model in combat with this unit is slain, you give this unit 1 Bone-Tithe point. This unit can have a maximum of 6 Bone-Tithe points. It does not even have to be this unit that slays them. It's just when this unit is in combat with that unit and one of those models is slain. So this is quite nice. Therefore, you get up to 6 Bone-Tithe points. Okay, cool. What can I do with the Bone-Tithe points? Well, the end of any turn, which is the end of every turn, I can pick a friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper unit wholly than 12 inches of this unit to be the target. So it's just keyworded to Ossiarch Bonereapers. Return a number of slain models to the target with a combined health characteristic equal to the number of Bone-Tithe points, then reset this Bone-Tithe points to 0. So let's just start with Mortek Guard. I return 6 Mortek Guard. That's great. I return 2 Liege Kavaloses. Even better. Well, maybe not better, but still, that's pretty fun. Not Liege Kavaloses, sorry. Kavalos Deathriders. I apologize. Return 2 Kavalos Deathriders, which are the cavalry unit that you have. Or I can return 1 of the big Morghast Archai because they're 6 health each, which is great. That's pretty nice. What I like is that in conjunction with being able to return those models, you can have multiple Gothizzar Harvesters returning multiple models at the end of any turn. Now, the survivability might be a question with only 10 health and 4-up save, so I'm a little bit sketchy on that, but I do want to see the points value on these guys because I think you could maybe build this kind of like fighting, returning army, which would be very, very interesting, especially returning those big, large models. In addition to that, they have a once per turn across the army, so multiple Gothizzar Harvesters wouldn't be able to use this, and only 1 in your army would be able to do it in any combat phase, which does mean every combat phase, and you pick an enemy infantry unit in combat with this unit to be the target. You roll a d3, and on a 2+, you inflict a number of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. For each model slain by this ability, you can return 1 slain model to a friendly Mortek Guard unit wholly within 12 inches. This will also generate you a Bone-Tithe point as well. So every mortal wound you do will effectively bring 2 models back to a Mortek Guard unit, although at different timing points in the list. So that means you could potentially run a bunch of Mortek Guard and you can run a bunch of Gothizzar Harvesters and you could really be protecting them. You could even have 10 Mortek Guard in front and then your Harvester behind, which is quite interesting, or even 20, because you've got a bigger wound pool. So these are going to be really interesting points-wise, and if they end up making it on the table, you're already fighting for a lot of spots for good war scrolls in this army, so I quite like this. So let's talk about Mortek Guard then. Mortek Guard is a unit of 10. They have a champion. They also have a standard bearer, so that does mean if you do that additional rally, you can add an additional dice when you use the rally command ability. They have got, so a unit of 10, obviously can be reinforced to a 20, with each model having 1 health each, a 4-up save, move 4 inches, and control value of 1. So really what we're asking ourselves is, can a unit of 20 of these control an objective against our opponent? Now, we already know we can reduce their control score and improve our control score, so it feels quite good. In combat, they have 2 attacks with their netherite weapons that hit on 3s, but they wound on 4s. They've got no rend and they've got damage 1. They do have anti-charge +1 rend, which can stack with the other +1 rends. And they've also got crit 2 hits, so they could do some pretty good damage, especially with exploding 5s. And lastly, they have a shield wall ability where you ignore all modifiers to save rolls for this unit, positive and negative, for the rest of the turn if this unit did not use a move ability in the same turn. Now, this could be a bonus because you might not have Katakros in your army giving you +1 save. But if your opponent has like over Rend 2, then maybe you're going to want to make it so you can ignore the Rend. Don't forget, we already know we can also have a 5-up ward save. So 20 of these with either 3-up save or an unrendable 4-up save and a 5-up ward save with a Harvester nearby, returning potentially up to 9 models to this unit at the end of every turn, feels like an incredibly tough brick wall to get through, in my opinion. So that could be quite interesting. So the real question is are they going to do enough damage, or are they just literally like a bone wall, going to stand on objectives and just get hit and fight back and hit and fight back? That'll be really interesting, in my opinion. So we'll have to see how that looks. We'll have to see what the points, but I think it would be really interesting to play with. So if you don't want some infantry, you want some kick-ass cavalry, you've got Kavalos Deathriders. This is a unit of 5, and each model of the unit has got 3 health with a 4-up save, which means a unit of 5 is going to have 15 health, or a unit of 10 is going to have 30 health. With a 4-up save is pretty good, with Katakros giving them +1 save, and obviously you can take them in the battle formation where 3 units of these are going to make that scout move early at the game. Now, they move 10 inches, which means that you would effectively get 3 units of these moving 16 inches up the board on the first turn, which is pretty fast, in my personal opinion. In combat, they have 3 attacks each per model, 3s and 4s. Now, the wounding on 4s is where it gets really rough, because there is actually quite a lot of -1 to wound auras going around in some of the other armies. They have Rend 1, and their damage 1, unless they charge, in which case they go up to damage 2. This does mean with a champion that unit of 5 is going to have 16 attacks damage 2, which feels pretty standard across many of these cavalry units, which I like. But the reason these guys probably are quite good is because they have the same ability to move through infantry when they charge, like the Liege Kavalos or Zandtos. Death Rider Wedge is when this unit uses a charge ability, it can pass through infantry as if it wasn't there. And then the unstoppable charge is if this unit charges phase, pick an enemy infantry unit on a 2+, you can do D3 mortals. There is so much anti-infantry stuff in the Bonereapers book. These guys are very survivable, in my opinion. Next to a Gothizzar Harvester, because they've got 3 health each, you have the ability to heal up to 2 at the end of any turn. So a big unit of 10 of these might be even better than a unit of 20 Mortek Guard, because you have so many more wounds that you can just you have a bigger wounds pool. 20 Mortek Guard is 20 health, and then 10 Kavalos Riders is 30 health. Therefore, your Gothizzar Harvester, your unit is less likely to be completely wiped out, and your Gothizzar Harvester is more likely to be able to constantly return models into that unit, which I think is quite interesting. Anyway, Death Riders feel pretty nice, in my personal opinion. That pre-game move, if you're playing in that battle formation, means these guys are going to be very fast and very aggressive early. I quite like that build. Love to see it. Next up, we're going to talk about the artillery piece in the Ossiarch Bonereapers, and I personally think that this is wild. Okay, so it's got 12 health with a 4-up save, which is great, because it's going to be really difficult to get rid of. Only moves 5 inches, but it does have a control value of 5, so it's going to be perfect for deck chairing, which is where it just sets up a little deck chair, and it sits on an objective in your deployment zone, and then it's control 5, which is nice. It means your opponent's going to really struggle to get it. Okay. Now, the reason it's here is because it's an artillery piece. It's also mega survivable, 6-up ward save, and it does have the War Machine keyword, which is important. But War Machines are not limited in this game, right? So the Dread Catapult is 24-inch range, 4 attacks that hit on 4s, which is bad, wounds on a 2, and is only Rend 1, which is bad, but is D3 plus 2 damage. If you are shooting against infantry, then it's going to be Rend 2. It's also got crit 2 hits, so if you do end up spiking really well on the 2 hits, you are going to have even more 2-up wound rolls to make, which is really nice. So this thing could do some pretty nutty damage, in my opinion, especially if you take multiples. And this is where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about the Deathly Barrage ability. This is done in any shooting phase, and it's done with every Mortek Crawler that you have. Pick an enemy unit that was targeted by all, so every single one of this unit's shooting attacks is phased to be the target. If the unit that you're shooting with is wholly within 12 inches of an Ossifector, then you add 1 to the roll, which means on a 3-up, that unit that you targeted with all of the attacks have got Strike Last. Now, that does not mean... so it's going to be a 3-up. 4-up if you don't have the Ossifector. If you aim with the first one, then you can aim and miss. You could try it with the second one, which is quite nice as well. Now, I think if you have 3 crawlers in the sub-faction, which lets you get +1 to hit, so all 3 of them will be hitting on 3s, I think this starts to make a pretty scary gun line out of your army. It does a lot of damage, and lastly, even if they try to run towards you and start fighting you, those units are striking last, which is pretty devastating in my opinion. So I personally think this is going to be like a quintessential tool in the Bonereaper list. But if you get really crazy and you take 3 crawlers, maybe even more than 3 crawlers, depending on their points, you could do an absolutely stunning amount of damage at range, which I think is quite fun. I think it's fair to say that Deathriders, and when we look at Archai in a moment, this army can be fast. And obviously with the Mortek Crawlers, you're able to do a lot of power projection or doing damage at range thanks to the artillery pieces. But I would say that the Teratic Cohort, which we're about to look at, are going to be maybe quite important for the army for your ability to deep strike a unit towards the back of the enemy board, and because of that they're quite fun. So the Teratic Cohort is 8 models, which is a Warcry warband, so they're kind of an odd different mixture of units, but each one of the models has got 2 health with a 4-up save, and they move 7 inches. They have an okay combat profile, not very impressive, with 2 attacks each, but 16 attacks across the unit potentially. The big reason you would take these guys is during deployment you can use the Predator's Cunning to put this unit into reserve, and then in your movement phase you can set up this unit anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches from all enemy units. Now, some units like this, like with Daughters of Cain, the Canary, have always been really good for being able to achieve battle tactics, being on board edges, or being at certain parts of the board. Their job has been always to score points, not really to engage in the fight. But these guys could deep strike, kill some unit at the back of the board, maybe lock up a shooting unit, any of those things. Ultimately 8 models with 2 health is 16 health on a 4-up save. That's actually quite a lot to get rid of as a chaff unit, which I think is interesting. But yeah, I would love to know what you all think about this unit in particular. So the next unit we're going to look at is one of the more elite infantry units. It's Necropolis Stalkers. They come as a unit of 3, and each one of the models has got 4 health with a 4-up save and a 6-up ward save. They move 6 inches, and they are an interesting unit. Points-wise, could really decide if this unit is going to be an auto-take or is going to just be completely trash. Because their Stalker Blades have got 4 attacks, 3s and 3s, Ren 2, which is excellent, but only damage 1, with no way to improve that damage. And they do have crit 2 hits. So they are potentially, from Unit 3, going to dish out a lot of attacks. It's going to be 12 attacks, but it's not as many attacks as a unit of 5 Deathriders, which is 16 attacks. The Deathriders also obviously get +1 damage on the charge. So when I say their damage isn't that impressive, I'm comparing it to units inside of its own book. And mainly because this is in that elite category of 3 models, where some of those 3 model units should be really strong, but sometimes the 5 model units seem a little bit stronger. However, they do have ability they can do in any combat phase, which does mean every combat phase. So you get to pick an ability called Quadrec Aspects, and you pick one of the following effects to apply for the rest of the turn. Subtract 3 from the control scores of enemy units while they're in combat with this unit, which obviously with some of the other things that we've seen can stack some massive minus control values. Subtract 1 from hit rolls for combat attacks that target this unit specifically to help with their survivability, but you've already got like +1 save, 5-up ward, so it feels like that is a bit of a nothing burger unless you're against the right sorts of units. And then Destroyer Aspect, which maybe is the spiciest one, which is ward rolls cannot be made for damage points inflicted by this unit's combat attacks. However, there is one of those manifestations which reduces the ward value of units around it, which feels like that is probably better anyway. And then you've got Precision Aspect. This unit's melee weapons have anti-hero +1 rend, while this unit is in combat with an enemy hero. So it does mean any enemy heroes is going to be hitting at rend 3. You can give them exploding hits. You can make them +1 to wound and +1 to hit. So unit 6 can dish out a huge amount of attacks, but I don't know if that's going to compete with any of the other combat output that we're seeing. In addition, I feel like with the Gothizzar Harvester for healing, the speed of some of the other units, and the ability to already reduce wards and stuff, those units are probably going to be more effective. But points is going to be the justification for that. Next up, if you don't want to build Stalkers and instead you like to build Immortis Guard, then that's the right decision. Because 4 health, 3-up save on a unit of 3. A Immortis Guard are a unit of 3 models. Okay, obviously you can have a unit of 6. 4 health with 3-up save, they move 5 inches, and they're okay in combat with 3 attacks each, 9 across the unit. 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 2 with crit 2 hits. So it's not incredible, like it's not like going to blow your mind, but the reason you're going to take these guys, and probably always take these guys, is because of the passive Soulbound Protectors. You add one to the ward rolls for friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper heroes within this unit's combat range that's within 3 inches. However, each time you make a ward roll of a 1 for a friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper hero that's in range of these guys, this unit is going to take a damage point, and they can't make ward saves against them. Now, these guys have got a better armor save than their Stalker brothers, where they have a 3-up armor save. Near Katakros, they're going to have a 2-up armor save. And that means when Katakros decides to use the Allegiance ability so that everyone has a 5-up ward save in combat, these guys are going to give heroes that they're in combat with, friendly heroes, they're going to give them a 4-up ward save. So you're going to have Katakros with a 4-up ward save. You're going to have heroes with a 4-up ward save. As he's been pointing out in the chat, the idea that you maybe throw in our Soulreaper, which earlier on we dogged on a little bit, but he potentially goes in and gives you a -1 to wound aura, done some catapults for some strike lasts. The survivability on this is nuts. Absolutely nuts. A 4-up ward save on top of some pretty significant armor saves. Seeing as these were already good in the last edition, there's already going to be loads of these knocking around, and this is a genuine problem and really fun to see. Love these guys. Yeah, and a Gothizzar could restore models to this unit if you wanted to, which is fun. So if we want to go for even bigger elite infantry, you've got the Morghast Archai. So these come as a unit of 2 with 6 health each, which does mean still a Gothizzar Harvester can return 1. 6 health each with a 3-up armor save. So that's going to be 12 health across the unit. They move 10 inches, which is nice and fast. And their spirit weapons are 3 attacks each that hit on 3s, wound on 2s, are rend 2 and damage 3. And they also have the anti-monster +1 rend. So this means they're going to be rend 3, damage 3, and they've also got crit 2 hits. So if they're hitting against monsters, they're going to be really good. It's only 6 attacks out of the unit, but potentially 18 damage from the unit as well, which is nice. Obviously, you can reinforce this, so you end up with a unit of 4 of these. So you could have a lot of attacks, potentially. Now, they do have this really fun passive called Ebon Raw Armor, where they have a 3+ ward save against any mortal damage inflicted by spells, prayers, and any manifestations, which is really good in the right matchup. In addition, if you make successful ward rolls for this unit, or if this unit destroys a manifestation, which is probably what you're more likely to do, run around smashing manifestations, give this unit an arcane charge token. This unit can't have more than 1, and the way that works is in any hero phase, you can give +1 to cast to a friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper wizard that's wholly within 12 inches by using up that arcane token. Now, obviously, if you take them in the battle formation where you get +1 to cast as well, there is always going to be a place of power on the board if you're using the Games Workshop terrain maps for an additional +1 to cast. So you could have some +3 to cast spells, which feels pretty spicy. So a great combat unit that's anti-manifestation, that's also pro-casting. This is really fun. I like this Ebon Raw Armor, Discharge Armor thing. That's fun. It's a really cool little mechanic. I'm not saying it's good. I just think it's a good and fun thematic rule. So the other version of these are Morghast Harbingers. So they're not quite as defensive. They're still a unit with 2 models with 6 health each, but instead of having a 3-up save, they have a 4-up save. And the reason that they are slightly less defensive is because they're much quicker. They're the same movement characteristic, but importantly, when they do a charge ability, instead of rolling 2d6, you're going to roll 3d6, which is also going to be if you do a counter charge. And this feels like this is incredibly spicy, with the Mortek Crawler shooting units and giving them strike last, and then these guys charging in. There feels like there's some incredible fun mechanics. Zandtos charging in at the same time, giving these guys +1 to their attacks characteristic, so that you end up with, instead of 6 attacks across a unit of 2, you end up with 8 attacks, or a unit of 4, you eventually end up with 16 attacks. Feels pretty spicy, in my personal opinion, especially Rend 3 against a monster. I think you're just going to wipe some monsters out. In addition, they have this special ability called Heralds of Nagash, where once per turn for the army, so if you have multiples of these, multiple units of these, you're only going to be able to choose one, you declare a Relentless Discipline ability, which is our battle traits, which we talked about at the start. This unit is affected by that Relentless Discipline ability as if it were wholly within range. So this does mean turn 1, I could just yeet these guys up the board, throw them into my opponent with a 3d6 charge, and then being sat back at the board probably next to my crawlers, I can just be like, cool, activate the ability, you guys can have a 5-up ward save if I want. Or maybe, probably not +1 to wound because they already wound on 2s. Give them +1 to hit, and you have got like this absolute incredible turn 1 charge unit that's going to smash, which is, I think, very interesting. As well as obviously, or you could take the other character that gives units strike first as well. If you wanted to go the other way, strike first, strike last. There's so many ways to do stuff in this army. I think it's genuinely very interesting. There's going to be a lot of counterplay. To round us off, we're going to start at the top of the pile. We're going to start with Nagash, the Lord of Undead. Now, obviously, you can use him in any of the death armies, but we're going to talk about him in Ossiarch Bonereapers. He's got 18 health with a 3-up save and an innate 5-up ward save, which does mean if he's near a unit of Immortis Guard, he is going to have a 4-up ward save, which feels fine. In my opinion, so get your Nagash orders in. He's got control value 10, so he's obviously going to be great for contesting and controlling objectives, and moves 10 inches, which is nice and fast. In combat, 4 attacks, 3s and 3s, Ren 2 D6 damage, which is swingy, and Zephyr Nabar has got 4 attacks, which is damage 3, but definitely a combat profile that has got the potential to do a lot of damage. In addition to this, he is a 9-cast wizard. 9. Not 3, not 2, 9. Because obviously he's a Bone Reaper wizard, you are going to be able to cast the manifestations from him as well. He's also a War Master, so there'd be the general. Is unique, you can only have one of him. He's also a hero and a monster. Okay, so Rob, he's got 9 casts. What happens if he miscasts? Well, don't worry about that because he's got a Staff of Power. Add 2 to the casting rolls for this unit while it has not miscast any spells this turn. So he's got +2 to cast. And if this unit does miscast, you ignore the restriction that will stop this unit from casting any more spells this turn, which is amazing. So you can cast 9 different spells. Okay, so what spells can he cast? Well, obviously the spell law. In addition to the spell law, the manifestation law. In addition to that, he's got his own spell, Invocation of Nagash, which is cast on a 7. This unit can cast his spell more than once per phase. More than once per phase, and pick a visible unit wholly within 18 inches of this unit that has not been picked to be the target of this spell. So you cannot have picked a unit. If the target is an enemy unit, inflict D3 mortal damage. So 9d3 mortal damage across the enemy army at 18 inches is one of the most aggressive gunline profiles we've seen. And if the target has the friendly death unit, if the target is a friendly death unit, you can return a number of slain models to the target unit with a combined health characteristic of up to 3. So return 3 Deathriders or 3 Mortek Guard. The target has a 5+ ward save until the start of your next turn. So you can be dishing out ward saves as well if you want to, which is quite nice. So you've got a bunch of different things this guy can do. In addition, Nagash can just completely lift models, which is really rubbish, but great if you're using Nagash. Once per turn, at the end of any turn in combat, he can do a rampage. Pick a visible enemy hero or monster in combat with this unit to be the target. Hide a dice in one of your hands. Your opponent must pick one of your hands or containers. If they pick the one hiding the dice, this ability has no effect. If they pick the empty one, the target is automatically destroyed. Now, with countercharge and also power through, and the fact that this is done in every turn, this is comfortably going to be one of the most egregiously, if not the absolute most massively aggressive abilities in all of Age of Sigmar. This is just auto-slaying stuff every combat phase, and with some Immortis Guard making this guy have a 3-up armor save, 4-up ward save, you're just going to be lifting anything that you need, which is just crazy good. So, pretty great unit, in my opinion. And I am a little bit... I just want everyone to know, if you are a big Nagash fan, I'm really happy for you. But in my opinion, gods shouldn't be in a war game. God should be like something special that you add in. Just the ability for this guy to cast 9 spells unimpeded, and then also just shut down monsters and heroes by just yeeting them off the board every time, in my opinion, is a little OTT. But there we go. Ossiarch Bonereapers, in my opinion, and when I was doing all of the faction previews, feels like one of the most engaging armies to play. You've got so many ways to get strike first. Well, not loads of ways. You've got a way to get strike first. You've got a way to get strike last. You've got the ability to improve ward saves or add ward saves to the army. You can reduce the abilities the movement on your opponent's armies. You've got the ability to shut down how fast they charge with command traits and stuff, which I think is good. Add 2 to those. It seems really geared towards being anti-infantry, which is quite interesting, which I think is quite fun. It feels very survivable. It's got enough healing in it. It's got some very fun combos with multiple Gothizzar Harvesters, which I think is fun. So I think all around it feels very good, and you're going to really struggle. Those units that are good, like NAGASH or the Immortis Guard, are going to cost a lot of points. So you're not going to have lots of them. So board control might be your issue. You might struggle to hold objectives. But also, it feels like you can dish out a lot of damage as well. So the real question is how's it going to pan out when we get to points and army list building? But definitely it feels like NAGASH is obviously very good. Feels like Katakros is good, Arkhan's good. Feels like most of the units are good. Probably Stalkers are the one that feels a little weak for me. The manifestations are crazy. So it feels like it's going to be a good army to play. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Let me know what you think of it, and please do leave some comments. And thank you to everyone in the Honest Wargamer Twitch who's been hanging out with me while I do this. And thank you to everyone in the Honest Wargamer Patreon who support me while I do this. Couldn't do any of these reviews without being paid to do it as my job. So please do support the show if you can. And we've got some great fun faction chats where all these images will be. So do let us know. Do chat in there with us. And thanks for watching my video. I'll see you guys soon.